Okay, so the first book that I read was 13 Reasons Why, and this book is, for those of you that have read it, you will know that it's a pretty heavy and serious book. It deals with a girl who has committed suicide and what basically she's left behind, but you really only get the perspective of her and the other narrator of the story, who is Clay. He's a boy who she had somewhat of a relationship with when they were in school together, and he is the recipient of some cassette tapes that she has recorded prior to her death, and then she sent them out so that the people that she felt really affected her could have somewhat of an explanation about why she made the choice that she did. The way this book was written was very interesting because it does switch back and forth between Hannah and Clay's narration. So you get both of their perspectives on things, really driving home that point of there is way more than one side to every story. So especially in high school. And then the fact that it was written after her death, there was no, hero saving the damsel in distress. I mean, it was already done. And the way that it was ended was very interesting because there was no, moment of, it's all better now. You're kind of just left. And I think that was a nice way to do it because I feel like that's often the feeling that people are left. They're kind of just left hanging when something like this, like a tragedy happens like this. So the writing style is really something that I feel like students could really get into. Choosing that dual narration is something they could experiment with in their own writing, kind of trying to get away from that typical story arc of, there's a problem and then there's a resolution, and maybe leaving their readers wanting just, a little bit more is really something that you could discuss with students who have read this book, obviously in addition to the social topics and discussions that you could bring up. The Fault in Our Stars is another text movie that kind of doesn't follow that cookie cutter, everything's great at the end. The two teens that both have cancer fall in love. They travel, they do all these wonderful things together, but then the author chooses to kind of turn you around because you think the character who's had all the problems, who's been the most weak, is ultimately going to be the one who succumbs to her illness, when ultimately it's not. It's the other character. And again, something that students can discuss about having that kind of twist in the storyline, bringing up characters that are not, healthy. I mean, that is a true thing that happens. People who are sick can fall in love just like anybody else can. So having your main characters be different in some way than just your average teenagers. So having unique characters is something that students could try to utilize or discuss in writing of their own. The quote from The Fault in Our Stars was, "As he read, I fell in love the way you fall asleep, slowly and then all at once." So that's a great quote. I think it really sums up, it's short, and it sums up kind of what it means to fall in love. You fall, we're nervous and we wait and we question, and then all of a sudden it happens. You're there and you really can't do anything about it once it happens. So that, is a well-known quote from that movie and book, but it really resonated with me. Going back to 13 Reasons Why, the quote I chose from that book is, "I wanted to tell you everything, and that hurt because some things were too scary. Some things even I didn't understand." How could I tell someone I was really talking to for the first time, everything I was thinking? I couldn't. It was too soon. So that was from Hannah, and that would be a great quote to dissect, to discuss, and it really gives you insight into what she was thinking. And then Clay, at the same time, at that instance in the book, having no idea what was going on with her. So really just speaking to that lesson of, you really never know what someone's going through. Even when you think you do, you might not. So having these characters with multiple layers, but giving insight into them and the lack of insight that others have into them through the way that the story is told, is a really great tool and skill. The last book that I read was Boy Meets Boy. And this book I thought was very interesting because it followed the typical story arc, a romance. They see each other, they're interested in each other, you get that warm fuzzy, then they start seeing each other, they're dating, then they have this problem, and then they resolve it, and it's great. But the fact about the characters is that they're gay. So while it follows that kind of cookie cutter storyline, the characters are very unique and a minority to what we're typically used to seeing, where it's a boy and a girl falling in love. So that is great because it also brings up people's thoughts about things, why we view things as so different when they're really that not different at all. But the author does do a nice job of kind of balancing this, utopic like community where the captain of the football team also happens to be a drag queen and everybody's just cool with that, with also one of the main characters, Paul, having a friend, Tony, who is also gay, but then his parents are very religious and they don't accept him as being gay. So you do have kind of that tempering of this lovey-dovey, everything's great and accepting with that character. So there is some unfortunately reality in the story. So it does give you that contrast of like, oh, everything's great and they're in love and yeah, but this. And then it really makes you stop and say, well, why do people think that? Like, it's not that different. It's not really different at all. So the quote I chose from that book is, I find my greatest strength in wanting to be strong. I find my greatest bravery in deciding to be brave. If there's no feelings of fear, then there's no reason for courage. So, I mean, that's a wonderful life mantra, but the main character, he wanted to be strong for his friends. He wanted to stand up for his best friend who was struggling with his family life. He himself was pointed out as having, a pretty easy coming out process, and he was very accepted by his family and it wasn't questioned. So he really did get that kind of dual aspect of, when you see it one way, it doesn't really make so much sense that it's so difficult and so frowned upon the other way. So that's a great starting point, topic, conversation. Again, I mean, all of these books, movies are great for just having discussions with students, and I believe it would bring up, tremendous dialogue, but also then discussing the author's choice of story. He didn't emphasize really the fact that these two main characters were gay. It was just kind of a secondary storyline. The fact that they were interested in each other and that they were in love, and they were also having problems with friends who were having, other relationships and exes and all of that stuff that, everybody goes through. And the fact that they were gay was really not that important. And I like that. So, and I think students would like that too, but they probably need some coaxing to kind of pull that out. And it would be a great way to study a book.